Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about sets of the mostly complete. I mean, when you say complete in this case, it's sort of like, a loaded term, but the Schubert piano sonatas, the ones he actually finished and the ones that have bits and pieces and the other piano works all gathered together in a box. Because when I spoke about the Beethoven piano sonatas in the reference recordings, and I mentioned Wilhelm Kempff, who was the reference recording, absolutely the reference recording, for many, many decades, or one or two anyway, some people flipped out and said, no, it's got to be Schnabel, or it's got to be this or that, and all the whatever. It was Kempff. That's the bottom line. It was Kempff. And then later, Brendel got pushed and pushed and pushed, but he kept doing things over and over again, and it stopped making any difference. And besides, we all know the answer, right? The answer was Richard Good. So there you go. Anyway, look, it was Kempff. But some of you pointed out that Kempff would be less controversially selected as the reference recording for Schubert piano sonatas. So, yes, you're right. Here it is. It was also the reference recording for Schubert, and definitely less controversially than Beethoven. And the reason is because when these were recorded, let's see, when were these recorded? We have lots of little dates. Do we have dates here? No, we have timings. Let me see if we can get some dates. Because when these were recorded, Schubert piano works were not the thing that they later became. They were considered to be really specialty repertoire. And usually 65, 67, all right, so the 1960s, let's just say, the mid-1960s. They really were. There were a few works, of course, that people performed, a couple of the sonatas, number 21 particularly, the big B-flat sonata, but generally speaking, the last three, but as a group, and it's really marvelous because there's a whole pile of them. I mean, the big B-flat one is number 21. So we're talking about lots and lots of sonatas here. And most people paid very little attention to anything but, one or two. And then there were the short works. There's the Wanderer Fantasy, of course, which was Schubert's most famous piano work, probably his big piano work. And then the Moments Musicaux and, some of these other little tchotchkes, the three piano pieces, D946 and let's see, the Impromptus, of course. Yes, the Impromptus. They were fairly well known. But to specialize in playing Schubert sonatas was considered rather eccentric because they were sort of unvirtuosic and they were also regarded as a little bit formally dysfunctional and kind of hard to pigeonhole. And of course, there were textual issues because of the ones he finished, the ones he didn't finish. I mean, it was a little complicated. Let's put it that way. And so Kempff was the guy who I think really put a focus on the Schubert sonatas on the map. And he played them very, very beautifully. I mean, Kempff was a pianist who was not known for being particularly demonstrative. I mean, he had a very good technique. All of these people have very good techniques. He could play whatever he wanted to play, essentially. But he was known for focusing on the Austro-German repertoire. First of all, Schumann, Beethoven, those people. And not really like Chopin and others like that. And, Mozart to a degree. But he really was the German Romantic pianist par excellence at that point in time. And his style, like I said, was not terribly demonstrative. It seemed to be ideal for Schubert because there's an inward quality to these Schubert sonatas that, a lack of gratuitous virtuosity that really played to his strengths, to his sense of flowing, lose yourself in the music, but keep it moving kind of humility. And I think that, these performances, of course, have held up extremely well, very, very well. They have been equaled, of course, by other pianists. And this was before, people went crazy about Richter, who started doing eccentric things to the sonatas, playing them very, very slowly, for example. Or Radu Lupu, who might have been the Schubert guy for the 70s and 80s for the next generation of Schubert pianists. because, that they did, for some reason, seem to come in waves. At Lupu and Uchida and people who really focused on Schubert. Of course, Alfred Brendel, who did his best to kick Kempff off of his pedestal in the Austro-German repertoire department. And he had plenty of marketing help from Philips at the time. But all of that notwithstanding, these Schubert recordings have held up, withstood the test of time, let us say, because of their simplicity, their basic musicality, their lyrical expressiveness, their sense of working with the music as it is and not trying to make something out of it that it isn't. I know that's a bullshit phrase. I mean, who knows what it really means? But you do get a sense listening to these performances that the performer and the music are one. There's not an outside force impelling Kempff to do certain things to these works. They just unfold. And that's such a beautiful thing in this music, especially music that may have some like sonata formal kind of issues, as Schubert did periodically, and who didn't have a lot of performance opportunities, and so he really didn't know when to stop. And so, all of those things, the more organic and natural you can make the music sound, the better off you're going to be. And Kempff was really marvelous at that. And so here it is, the reference recording for Schubert sonatas. And it really holds up. Like I said, there have been many, many great Schubert recordings since then, particularly of the late sonatas, of course, because everyone does them now. But if you're going to look for a clump of Schubert, if you want to get your Schubert in a clump, this is every bit as viable a choice as anything else out there, for sure. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.